definitely hard when things are rough. I think the few things that have always helped me is remembering God is not a vending machine, number one, right? So it's not just like, here's my list of wants, thanks, right?
Thanks, Santa. Yeah. God is not Santa. Yeah.
And again, when he doesn't give you something, it's not because you were naughty that year and you got coal, right? It's because he sees what we don't see. Right? So he sees the big picture. Like you said, some of these rough things, are needed for our purification or our growth or our resilience or to help others, whatever it is.
What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Bassam Hannah podcast. Today's a very special episode for me because I have a dear friend who has watched me grow up. And I guess me the same with her. And she's turned into this beautiful, evolved person that I very much look up to. We have Sandra Tadros Guirguis with us today. Sandra, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
Maybe before we get started, you can just do a quick intro about yourself and what you do to the audience so that they know who you are.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sandra. I am passionate about all things wellness. And a lot of that, which I think we'll talk about later, comes from my own struggles. And so when things were difficult, more than ever, I leaned back on my professional training, which is in healthcare. I work as a clinical pharmacist. I also do a lot of public and corporate speaking on wellness and teach fitness classes. So a lot of gut health, mental health, that's all my jam. I like really cheesy jokes, like really cheesy, and I'll like snort laugh as well, part of a blended family, and my faith matters a lot.
Amazing. And I want to unpack a lot of that. Before we get into STG Wellness, which is what you do now, let's talk a little bit more about the history.
Sure.
So like schooling, work, profession, you're a pretty prototypical Egyptian.
I know, it's true. So I went very original with my career choice.
Yes.
So I grew up in Scarborough, went to school downtown Toronto, went to pharmacy school, started practicing pharmacy, really loved it. I moved to Michigan with my late husband, who was doing his residency there. And that's a whole different way of healthcare as well. I worked for a big chain there. So I saw all kinds of ways to practice healthcare. It was my first exposure to the drive-through pharmacy as well.
Okay.
And we moved back where I did some remote dispensing. And now I continue to work at a family health team, which is my favorite setup because it's so interdisciplinary. So I'll go to work and I work alongside the nurses, the doctors, the dietitians, the social workers, and we're able to really give that holistic care to our patients that I was telling you I really love.
Okay, I want to maybe before we get into this, the subject that I want to talk about, context. So I know you because one of my best friends is Dan, who is your late husband's brother.
Do you think he's watching? Can we say hi to
he
Dan?
He better be.
Hi, Danny.
Sup, Dan? Yeah.
And George, my other brother.
And George, obviously. And you came into my life at a very I'm going to call dysfunctional / find myself moment. Like you started dating Nina when Dan and I were very much misbehaving in his parents' house. And we watched your relationship evolve. We watched you and Mina turn from dating to engaged to married. And it was always like we looked up to you, and we obviously loved you both very dearly. And then the next part, I think maybe I want you to introduce, the thing that kind of grew us all up, was a moment that maybe I'll let you talk about. Sure.
So that was a really fun time. I remember you guys tearing through the house, and their mom, Tita Inez, or Tant Teresa, who makes the best food, could never keep up with all these hungry, boys running in and out of the house. And
thank you, Tita Inez. Yeah.
And we got married. We moved to Michigan, as I mentioned. I worked there. We moved back, and then there was some health challenges, but I think we never ever expected it to end the way that it did. And I'm pretty sure you guys didn't either. It was just like, okay, he's sick, we're going to pray. Buna's going to come to the hospital and pray. everything's going to be good, right?
Yeah.
And so there was a big bout of sickness when, do you remember I was pregnant with Bella?
I do.
And that was tough because, of course, I didn't
was
fit
in a
in
coma.
the chairs. That's right.
Yeah, he was in a coma.
Downtown, and we fasted and we prayed, and he came home. Mm-hmm. It was hard, and he had a walker and a wound vac and all this, and he was still so happy.
Yeah.
Like, it was, even if you didn't know him, I think people couldn't help but be touched by someone who was just like, thank you, God, that I'm getting fresh air today. Thank you, God, that I'm here. Never once was it, why me? And I
Right.
was just at a inspirational talk once, and someone said, don't say why me, say try me, And so here he was with the walker and the vac and, the tanks, and still like whipping through the aisles when we would go to see like the stamp shows or the coin shows,
Yeah.
and just still
Art
having a good time.
shows. Okay, so this isn't like a Mina-a-thon, but like I just want to spend some time, because like he had a big impact on my life. I didn't have big brothers growing up, and George and Mina were de facto my big brothers, because like I was literally at their house all the time. They would come home, I would see them, and all that stuff. Both you and him are incredibly kind and spiritual people. The first time that he was in the hospital, it was the first real close person to me that had gone to like into something like this, and we didn't know. And like you said, we do the prayer, we do the thing, and it was going negative, not positive. But throughout all of that, and pregnancy and all of that, like you both exhibited something that has stuck with me forever, which is like faith, true faith. Like it's easy to be faithful when things are going well, or things go bad and they turn the right way, and you're like, oh, it's a miracle, and like God is good, right? It's like when like like Job from the Bible, like you like the tests keep coming, right? And so that's like, and like that is where I remember this, and it's like it grew me up. Like I was a little kid, and then I watched my best friend go through something like that I can't imagine and don't wish on anybody, and his whole family, who is my family, and then it's like, shit, it doesn't always like work out. But in the middle, the part you're talking about, so Mina comes home,
and we're like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
believe in miracles,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah, everything-
God is good
we're on the
all
way
the
up.
time.
We're
Yeah,
all-
I'm all the
yeah, yeah.
I'll stop singing so I don't
Yeah.
shatter the glass
No, you're
behind
good,
you.
you're good.
But essentially, we're on top of the world. Things are tough, but like,
You
it's
guys moved
okay.
into your new house, the hot tub, the man cave.
Yes,
Yeah.
remember?
Yes, of course.
And then the really the unimaginable happens, right? We had beautiful Gabriel in that time, so now their kids are 2 and 4, and so cute.
Yeah.
And we're doing everything. We're lugging around things, but we're having a good time. And then he got sick, but it was like a cold. We were like, no problem. He's going to be in and out of the
Been
hospital.
through worse.
Oh,
Yeah.
and then and then I had gone one day, like I was sitting with him and we were just talking like normal, like, okay, the doctor's gonna come back, I'm gonna come home, like come back later and pick me up, okay? And I can't remember who from our family was with him. I'm like, I'm gonna take the kids out to like a park or something, no problem. And then I got a call from one of my brothers that we were just talking about, said, you gotta come, like he's not responsive. You have to sign things. And of course, the kicker to anyone who's ever been in that position is when you have to make decisions for the person that you want to run decisions by, it
Yeah.
really hits hard, right? Because you're like, okay, great, I'll just ask. Never mind,
Yeah.
right? So we go through this and have the family meetings and whatever, and things just deteriorated quickly. I'm not going to go into it too much because it'll end into like a full sob fest, but I talk about it in the book.
I will too, and I
in
don't
detail.
I don't have tissues. Yeah.
But in the end, and I think you talked about this faith, right? So in the end, when it was God's time to call him home, it wasn't what anyone expected. And there was just such a sense of betrayal, right? Because our minds on earth, we can't understand things. It's like, why God, this young man with a young family who does such good in the world.
Literally does everything right and is like the North Star to so many. Yeah.
So, and I think that was the time when my faith, and I think everyone that we just spoke of, was like, there's people who weren't going to church for a while and who, wouldn't pray, and were just like, feeling just so betrayed and abandoned. But I guess the piece in all of that is that, faith doesn't work like that, right? We're not faithful because God only gives us good things. And I think I love that you mentioned Job, and I actually talk about him in my book, how he really says, like, God gave and take away, but the Lord is the one that carries me. And so believing that we're just here for a short time and that God's not done with us and that we have some abundant living to do really, really helps. And eventually that healing.
So, like, rest in peace, Mina. We love you forever. What happens after that? Like, I know everybody talks about the moment, like basically up to the funeral, and then there's like 3 or 4 weeks where like no one leaves you alone, basically, and it's beautiful and overwhelming. But like, what's next? Like, what's your thought process? How do you pick yourself up? Like, what do you do?
I love that. I'm going to come back to that. Please remind me something. You reminded me of something really beautiful when you're talking. And if I can just tangent a little. So you know how you just said everyone's there in the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
The thing that I learned the most from my experience is when someone tells me they're going through something, I actually put a reminder in my phone for every week, every 2 weeks, whatever, to ask. Because guess what? Everyone comes at once when you're too numb and frozen to actually remember who said what
almost
or
annoying.
who came. Like, I appreciated
in
it.
the greatest way possible.
Yeah, you're just not there. Like, and, casseroles are really helpful. Someone like me that doesn't cook very well on a good day, or whatever it is, Bible verses, everything. But then when that numbness starts to fade and that like bone deep agony, there's almost a split second when you wake up, that moment of where am I? What day is it? What's happening? And then you remember everything. It's like paralyzing.
Yeah.
And
you're
then,
like alone.
Yeah. And then you're alone. And you don't blame people. Like, everyone went onto their daily lives.
Yeah.
But that's actually when you wish someone would reach out because you're too exhausted and weak to do the reaching out in that initial time.
It's hard to ask for help. It's like you feel like everybody's just like
busy. You don't want to be a bother. You're like, oh my gosh, they already came. They came to the viewing. They came to the funeral. They messaged me like, I can't ask more of anybody, right?
Yeah.
But that's, I think, for anybody watching, like if we could all just think of 2 or 3 people that are struggling, finances, health, parenting, relationship, anything, and just like put a little reminder, like every couple of weeks or whatever it is, to shoot a text, have a call, hey, how are things going? And I've never had it happen where the person wasn't like, oh my gosh, how did you know to reach out? And whether it's God whispers or whatever it is, I really do feel like we're meant to just constantly check on each other.
I couldn't agree more. And it's not faith-based, but it should be. It's like when somebody comes across your mind, send the text.
Yes.
Just send it. Don't send, like,
there's a reason they were
like it. That is like the God, like the whisper. Like, hey, like that person may need you. And like to anybody listening, it takes 2 seconds. It takes 2 seconds to be like, hey, how are you? If they don't want to talk to you, or
That's
if
fine.
it's like good, thank God, done. But like normally, like that thread, like once you've pulled on it, like you could save that person's week, month, year, whatever it is.
And you might never know, which is the cool thing. So they did this, CAMH, Center of Addiction and Mental Health, came and did an in-service at our clinic, and it was this program, Assist, right? And it was, in summary, how to talk to someone if they're in immediate crisis until they could get to. So say someone phones the clinic. We're not usually doing urgent care, but someone calls and says, I'm on a bridge, I have, God forbid, these pills, whatever it is. What can you say in that conversation until you can really get a trained professional in?
Right.
So first of all, God bless these people that do this day and night. But at a base level, one of the things that I learned that I found so helpful was there's one protective factor, the most protective factor, and it's community. They said if in that conversation you can find out they go to Tim Hortons and they see someone, there's someone that knows their name at their meeting, there's someone at work, wherever, and it just was such a reminder that we're surrounded by people, but people feel so lonely and not seen. Right. So you sending that message like, hey, Sandra, just want to know you crossed my mind, just want to know I'm thinking of you, could actually be life-saving without, sure. Even if they don't respond back and you never know it, right? They're like, huh, okay.
I couldn't agree more. And it's so easy to do.
Right?
Like, it's like a little thing that
especially now, even voice notes, there's no excuse,
or like
right?
send them a picture that like Google Photos, like Google
Photos
when
they come up in your memories.
Yeah. So just send it to them. It makes them feel great. And people do it to me.
That's such a good idea.
Amazing.
I'm going to add that.
Oh, well then. Okay, so you go through the unthinkable.
What's next?
The world's alone. Like the month or two of like overwhelming grief support is now over. Like, what's going through your mind? And this is an honest question that I've wanted to ask you for a while. Like, what's the first step?
It's so hard because that first step seems like the hardest and the biggest. Mm-hmm. You almost want to stay in your cocoon of, the grief cycle. It's all those feelings. It's anger and denial and sadness and all these things before you get to acceptance. And you could hang out there for a long time. And experts will say, after a year, it starts to become complicated grief and really we need extra support there. But grieving is actually a normal part of the cycle, part of healing, part of everything. But at some point, I think there's a conscious effort to, okay, I want to get out of this rut.
Right.
And a lot of people, the question is like, okay, how? Right?
Yeah.
I don't want to be here. Right?
I'm tired of being sad.
I'm so tired of being sad.
Yeah.
Right? And just feeling like listless, right? Like just moving from part and everything's so tiring, right? You're like, oh my gosh, I just made lunch, right? Because you're just
oh God, I pick the kids up. Yeah.
But everything's tiring when you're emotionally unwell and you're not sleeping and you're not eating, and it, of course, all feeds off each other.
For sure.
I think the first step is a conscious choice of I'm going to choose to get better. I'm going to choose to come out of this.
Starts from within.
Yes. There has to be that, okay, I want to do this. I'm going to do this. It's going to be hard. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to. I will get there, even if I'm millimeter steps. And then for me, the biggest piece, and I think whatever people believe, is faith helped a lot. Someone had texted me this verse, Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, not to prosper you, not to harm you, for hope and a future. And I think it's a universal message of hope. I'm not always going to feel like this.
Right.
There's a way. There's people that can help me. There's tools. And then baby steps. So we know that sleep's really important. So putting away electronics an hour before bed. That's something I do professionally in healthcare all the time, help people with sleep. And it's especially hard for people when someone passed. You know why? Because it's so lonely at night. So anyone who's had a partner, all of a sudden it's so quiet at night. You're like, is that still my side? Or do I go in the middle so it doesn't feel so lonely?
Oh,
do I move this stuff off their bedside? Like, it's a bunch of stuff that people don't think about that's really real. So of course, a lot of people turn to electronics because you don't want to see people, you don't want to talk, and then
you're numbing.
Yeah, 100%. But then that shuts off your melatonin. You don't get deep sleep. Deep sleep then affects your appetite the next day, and you see how it snowballs, right? So I always say even start making some self-care, some calming breathing before night. Start focusing on your sleep. Get up at the same time every day, even if you're on leave or whatever it is, resets your body clock. Start caring for your gut health. A lot of people don't know this, but our gut health is so linked to our mental health. Those happy chemicals, serotonin and dopamine, are mostly synthesized in the gut. So having a happy gut with healthy whole foods.
How do you go about doing that?
So prebiotic foods are like fertilizer, if you imagine, and probiotic foods as well. So prebiotic foods, and people can print a whole list, or if we can add it to the show notes or whatever, I'm happy to provide those lists. Things like apple and artichoke and
McDonald's.
Asparagus.
Yeah.
And then maybe if you pick out the...
take the pickle. Actually,
and
you know
ferment
what?
it.
Yeah. throw it away. And throw it away and then go to the grocery store.
There you go. And then probiotic foods. I really like kefir. I think that's an easy one. There's also sauerkraut and miso and things like that. But kefir is like fermented yogurt drink that you can just have in the fridge. And I'm not sure. There may even be some lactose-free variant if people can't have that. So you can put it in your shakes, your smoothies, your anything.
Okay.
Overnight oats. So you start to eat better. You start to have fuel. You start to have energy. You're starting to heal your mental health. Maybe you have the energy to sit outside if you're not ready to walk. So it's like little goals.
So, okay, so let's just stay on this tangent for a second because I have the worst sleep. I'm like, you can ask Marina. If I can sleep 5 hours a day, that's a good day. I just operate on less, or I've gotten used to it. But I definitely am on my phone until like literally the minute I pass out, or I have the TV on, which I'm sure is the same.
Correct.
I don't wake up at the same time every day. Like I sometimes have really late nights, and then it messes up the mornings and yada yada. So, and then I eat like garbage. So I as you're saying this, I'm like, there's like 3 really easy things I could do to probably greatly improve my life, which I'm going to note for myself.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Now, like back to like the process. So you're now like, I'm done, not done being sad, but I'm done with it like debilitating my life, right?
Well said.
It's time to like see what the next chapter is.
Yeah.
Right. And so you start doing this research. Then what?
So you start finding little, and you know the whole concept of like SMART goals or Atomic Habits, it's a really good book. And I can't stress it enough. It really is the small thing that becomes a habit. So I think
Right.
a lot of times people, and we see this at the gym all the time, right? People come and they're like, I'm going to come 7 days, like 4 hours each day. And it's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
People get discouraged or hurt or whatever. So I'd say like pick one small goal and just be like, okay, every day this week, I'm going to get up at the same time every day, because it's a myth that you can sleep in and catch up for sleep. And all the research is showing our body clock is really, really instrumental. And that might just be it for the week.
Okay.
And then that, and then maybe later on that week, it might be like, okay, I heard that at least 10 minutes of movement helps. I'm going to put on a Zumba video. I'm going to go for a brisk walk, 10 minutes. My endorphins will start to release if it's moderate intensity.
Right.
No equipment, no work. And then that might be something. But the biggest thing that I think supports all of those is community of some sort.
We have a very strong community.
100%. And sometimes that's not always a good thing, because, you'll see people and out of their love and everything, they'll come up to you and squeeze your face and be like, how are you? So tell me exactly, like, how did things go? And you're just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I don't want to think about it. Right?
I literally did that to you at the beginning of the podcast.
No,
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's all good. But I'm talking about like early
Yeah,
days,
yeah.
right? This is a decade later. That's different.
True.
But and one of the things that I think is important is people are always nervous. Like when I talk to other, I don't know if you know, I kind of became like the widow whisperer in our community. They'd connect me
I
with
didn't
any
know that.
young, and there's unfortunately a lot of young women that were widowed young. And one of the things that we kind of all discussed was helpful was you speak to whoever's going to connect you, and you can give them kind of guidance on what would be best.
Right.
And at first people are resistant because they're like, well, isn't that rude? But I'm like, no, think about how much better it is. So for example, say you and I are going to meet up for coffee, right? You want to check in. I could just tell you ahead of time, hey, Basim, listen, like it's kind of a hard day. I don't really want to talk about anything that went down, if that's cool with you. And I might also just
that's amazing.
and I might just space out a little. I don't really feel like talking, but I don't feel like being alone.
Yeah.
Then it's easier for you, because then you're not sitting there going like,
cheat sheet.
Yeah, what do I
it's
say? What do I
perfect.
do? So we could just show up and just like quietly sip our stuff and be like, is this cool? Yeah, it's cool. All right. High five.
Yeah.
And then
That's
I walk away
amazing.
feeling full without the nervousness of, oh, he's going to ask me something and I'm going to cry. I'm going to ugly cry here.
Yeah,
And
expectation management is key. Well, we did a little bit of that before the show started, right?
100%.
I also like, listen, like you're my sister. I want to make sure that you're in a good spot always. So
you very, very considerately ask me everything.
Yeah.
Is there anything you don't want to talk about? We'll
just
cut
picked
it.
up, but you've been super cool. Okay, so like, how do we get from, maybe just like fast forward a little bit, like you go through this process and you're now starting to like regain like a newness. I guess this is a new version of you though, right?
Totally new.
Like what is the difference between old Sandra and new Sandra? Like, what did you pick up? What skills did you pick up? We learn about all the hardships and the negativeness, and like, I get all that, but like, and that never goes away. Sorry, I haven't been through that kind of grief, and I hope to never. But so I can't pretend like I relate.
Yeah,
I've seen it from the outside looking in. What do you gain? Like, I know we talk about what we lose a lot, but what did you gain?
Yeah. So when you are, the 2.0 or this new version of yourself that's literally been rebuilt, I think the first thing is to stop trying to fit yourself into your old mold, because that person died. That person's gone, and that's okay, right? And with perseverance, you've kind of built up new. And I think there's a certain amount of resilience that is there. And for me, it was a lot of faithfulness. And I don't say this lightly when I say God carried me. Like, any credit really was, I know myself and my capabilities, and this wasn't them, right? So there's a little bit
You're underselling yourself, but I appreciate that.
There's some renewed faith. There's a new little bit of grit, which I think in our comfort culture, we lose a little bit. We've gotten a little bit soft. And so I think that you lose a lot, but you gain a certain amount of resilience.
Mm-hmm. And then from there, we're like, I don't know how many years into the process. I guess maybe that's the question, is like, how long did it take you to feel like this new self? Or did you start to realize like, okay, this is new me. This is my new normal. This is new me.
That's such a good question. And I don't think there was ever like a turning point. And so, for example, you're starting to kind of change, but you don't really see it because you're so focused on like just surviving, right? And I have my babies and I'm trying to be there for them. So you're just in this like fog almost for a long time. And then eventually you start to come out of the fog and you're like, okay, this is different than what I would expected. It's almost like, how do you learn to love the life you have, even if it's not the one you wanted, right? So now you're like, okay, I didn't want this, but I'm starting to appreciate different things. And then eventually I got to the point where I felt whole enough in myself to want a partner again, which is something I would have never imagined. And I remember even Mina telling me one time when he was sick, like, promise me that you're gonna, share it. And I was like, la 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 la.
But the shot is
knocking on everything. But and
but like think about the foresight that like that's a hard thing as a man, as like to be like, okay, like I see my mortality, or I'm now fearful of my mortality, and I care so much about you that I need to say some things that you might otherwise hear. So that's like, again, mad respect.
Right?
Yeah. Totally. That's hard, man. That's a hard thing to do. Like, as a guy, I'm just thinking about that. I'm like, I don't.
But when you really think about like really what the meaning of true love is, like, sure, there's that whole proprietor thing of your spouse, but just imagine them like in the trenches of sadness. Nobody wants that for their loved one at the end, and having gone through it, and I'm happily remarried now, and Ferry, who's so wonderful and has been
amazing person,
really behind STG Wellness and the whole. He's the entrepreneur, not me. He's very much like a science person. And so when you say about the versions of yourself, even the version of Sandra now that's doing all these corporate talks and whatever, that's been a lot through, again, what I've gone through, but also the support of my partner now, right? Of Fedi, who's encouraged me and
also his
great.
like massive shout out to Fedi, because it is not easy to walk into somebody who has such a completed life. Yeah. Right?
Totally.
And he does it with grace and understanding, from what I see from the outside.
Absolutely.
Like, I haven't spent a whole lot of time with him, but
100%.
the times that I see, I'm just like, dude, this man is like it is not easy to step into those shoes and to support in that way. And
so lovingly, One of the things that touched me the most was, it was like early on or something, and I can't remember what it was, if it was a cold day or shoveling, and he was like, do you want to check on Mina's parents and make sure they're okay? And I think like the love that he had, and said, Bella and Gabe, they lost their dad, and Mina's family and his brothers, and like he's very close with them, and he just came in with so much love for everybody, which it was
It's the only way it works.
grew so much in my eyes. I already respected him so much, but I remember thinking like, wow. But, but now having been through it, I'm like, listen, if anything happens to me, you have to marry, because it seems like a hard thing to say, but I know what it's like to be, it's not that you're ever going to not love your spouse or wish they were there. Okay, but they're gone and you still have decades to live.
Yeah.
I would
Loneliness
love for everyone I
sucks.
love to, have a companion, have a friend. Of course I want that. And so anyone that's watching that's like, no way, that's my spouse, maybe just reflect on it for a little bit. It's a conversation that, God forbid, if anyone does go, is very comforting to the person who's left behind, who's already missing you and struggling and feeling all kinds of guilt and stuff about being so alone. But if that conversation had been had, it's a gift that you leave your living spouse. They may or may not, but at least they feel like they have your blessing, which matters.
Even if you don't mean it, say it.
That's right.
Marina. Yeah.
He just can't be handsome.
Yeah. He's got to be like 4'3" and yeah. Okay, so we go through the like evolution of Sandra, and we are now at the point where like STG Wellness is now like at the forefront of your mind. Like you've kind of like gone through the grieving process. You've done everything you know. What is STG Wellness? Like what is it? And why did you start it? And then like, what is your goal for it?
So excited to share this with you. So STG Wellness started out really because a big part of it was after what I had gone through. I was still working in healthcare, which I love, but I always felt like we were missing the back end. Like I would talk to patients at the end of the visit with high blood pressure or with anxiety or with insomnia. I'd be like, exercise is really great. And they kind of go, and they'd leave.
Okay.
And then,
Give me my pills.
Yes, can I have a pill, right?
Yeah.
And then I eventually became a fitness instructor so that I could encourage people through group fitness, through personal training, and that was really fun. And then I learned about nutrition, and I just felt like there's this whole thing. We need to start looking at people in every way.
Like
how are you sleeping? Are you moving? A
Yeah.
holistic approach, right? So that's really what that started as. So it would be a holistic approach to wellness. So for example, one of the first people I had was a lady who was going through perimenopause and menopause. Mm-hmm. And yes, she wanted to talk about what possible treatment avenues are, but what does a woman need to know in her, midlife for wellness? So we talked about her bone strength. We talked about how women have an increased risk of dementia because of that drop in estrogen, and how balancing on one foot, for example, when you're brushing your teeth, how eating anti-inflammatory foods, how exercising helps with vasculature helps. So we really, again, talked about, yes, the hot flashes, which I'm not looking forward to in the night sweats, but we talked about everything. A lot of women don't know that women that have hot flashes and night sweats, those vasomotor symptoms could indicate an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. Did you know that's the #1 killer in women?
No.
Exactly, because it's always the men in Hollywood and stuff having the heart disease.
Right.
And women have atypical signs. So educating them that sometimes it just feels like heartburn or back pain for women. It's very rarely the sudden crushing elephant on the chest like it is for men. So it's really an opportunity for full education.
Okay.
And then the speaking came from that. So I guess the most passionate part I have for STG Wellness now is the wellness education. Mm-hmm. And so you can speak with a lot more people when you go. And it's happened through social media, which I was never really good at and still am not good at.
You're really good at it. You're really good at it.
Thankfully for all those apps that can help, right? But people would message me and say, hey, I work in HR for this company. Can you come and talk to us about anything, burnout. Another group said, hey, I'm a medical resident at this hospital. Can you come do a wellness session for us? Because our residents are, they're not sleeping well, they're not eating well, they need to care for others. And then we even did a little workout after, and I made up these cheesy names. I was like, okay, pick up the bedpan and rotate the patient. So it's an opportunity to have fun, whether it's a church group, can you come talk to the high school or the university group about prescription for happiness or anything really. Emotional, physical, mental wellness is my jam.
And so is STG Wellness a one-man operation right now?
Yes.
Okay. And do you want to see it continue to be that way, because then you can be more personal with each person that you interact with? Or do you see this as what is the vision?
The vision, so if we were to dream big.
You know, Sandra,
Right?
you know
Like,
that's all I do.
I know that's you.
You know,
I
that's all
almost feel
do.
like embarrassed saying it, but
No,
you're Mr. Like,
say it.
go for your dream. So I'm going to
If
say
you
it.
manifest it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you can't laugh.
I'm never.
I know you wouldn't.
Never.
I know.
Support
My
it.
bro. So I think I'm just like, come on, Sandra. But I imagine really taking wellness to the next level, like traveling everywhere and helping people almost put together wellness centers depending on whatever their budget or what they can imagine. So for example, somewhere with a low budget, well, can we put together a little health center, and can we teach you how to stretch and how to eat and have a little kitchen or whatever? If it's somewhere a little more extravagant, maybe it's like a wellness resort, and using my training in healthcare, but all the wellness factors, can we help get in all of the different specialists and really, or experts, and really make this a huge thing where there's prayer and then there's a workout and then there's whatever floats your boat.
Okay, so that's not crazy. That sounds awesome. And have you ever heard of this place in St. Lucia called Jade? It's like Jade Mountain or Jade Resort or something like this. It is a wellness resort.
Really?
Yeah.
Jade? I'm going to have to write that
what
down.
What you're describing is, but it doesn't have all of the intricacies. It's just like you can go to an all-inclusive and eat healthy and like do sessions and stuff.
Not great.
But it sounds like what you're doing is an evolution of that. So that's not crazy. And that's especially in a world like today, like that, like we live in today, that's so needed. Like as you were describing it, I'm like, when people tell me, do you want to go on vacation? When I say yes, I know it's going to be basically eating crappy food near the beach.
Yeah.
Right? Like limited activity, probably a bit too much drinking and like all that stuff. But what my body craves right now is an actual reset.
And I think that's with everybody. There'd be like no electronics
Yeah.
for like periods of time. You could pick up a magazine and a book if you wanted.
Sign me up. Sign me up.
Well, good thing you're the business mastermind.
Yeah, because I need you. Yeah. Okay, so I guess maybe the next we're not at resort starting phase right now, but you did write a book. What was the motivation for writing the book?
So I actually, believe it or not, resisted writing this book.
Okay.
For a long time. And I think I sort of casually mentioned to you, I was unofficially getting solicited to help people with their wellness journeys. And of course, I do this with my patients all the time. So it wasn't just grief over bereavement or someone that died, but people who were sad because of a relationship or health or you name it.
Right.
So I've been doing this for a long time. And then it was Fadi, my husband actually, who said to me one day, you should write a book. And I was like, no way. You know me, I'm a public speaker. I'd rather speak any day than write a book. And then he said one thing that I was never able to get out of my head. And it was like, sealed the deal for this. He said, but what if it reached someone that you wouldn't have been able to help otherwise? And I was like, huh. And then I couldn't unhear that or unthink
can't
that.
unring that bell.
So then I started very casually. I was like, okay, well, what would I tell someone? And you know how in a dream you can picture someone, but they're kind of foggy? Like you can't make out their face, but there's a person there.
Yeah.
So I kept picturing this like person who was sad, who's crying in the closet, and it seems like oddly specific, but that was my jam. When I was grieving, there was like a closet that was kind of quiet, and I grabbed one of my late husband's old shirts, and I would just sit there and hug it and cry into it quietly so I wouldn't wake up the kids. So I pictured someone in the closet. It sounds so sad, I know, but it's it's what...
It's your process.
Yeah, it was what I could picture. And I was like, oh crap, we can't leave her there, right? Her or him. So then I started making notes on my iPhone of like, well, what would you say? So I was like, well, they have to know about the grief process. Oh, gut health is really important. And I ran with this running list for, I couldn't even tell you how long until it became like a lot more than a little list, right?
It was a little book, yeah.
A little book. And again, it was so easy because of what I do. I'm constantly talking about health and wellness at work and outside of it. So then, and then I finally, I sat with Fadi and I said, okay, well, I'm just going to put it on Microsoft Word. I'm going to just type everything and I'm going to see. Maybe it's something that will never see the light of day, but I'll have it. And then I can just selectively give it to people like who might need it. So then I sat down with like half tears, half sobbing, half joy, and really just downloaded something that I think had been in the works for years in my heart. Like I feel like
Right.
I had been writing it in my heart forever.
Yeah.
But finally put it to paper. So that took, quite some time, but it was a lot more flowing. So people always ask me, is it easy to write a book? And I couldn't really answer that because in that instance, it was what was pouring out of my heart and my one message to the world. If you said to me right now, write a book about
Write a second book.
yeah, and a lot of people are like, where's the third? And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, right? Like, it's not there right now. And who knows if that ever changes, but that was on my heart, and that's why it came out easily. And then there's the process of sending your manuscript to publishers, seeing, waiting anxiously, and then the publisher that was a right fit had responded, and there's almost as long as it takes to write the book that it takes to
For
to
sure.
edit and formats and to go back and forth, and you become friends with the editor, because you're writing messages like, what do you mean by this? Or like, this is an awkward sentence. And
But that I mean, I don't take criticism well. I don't initially take criticism well. It like really like feels like a slap in the face.
Really?
And I can't imagine like you pour your heart out and you're like, this is perfect. Like it is it needs nothing. And then somebody comes and like
oh yeah,
tears it apart.
Ooh, oh yeah,
Yeah.
incorrect syntax.
Yeah. What's a syntax? Yeah.
But what's so funny, what I learned the most about that, and I hear you, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like takes you back to the school days with all the red pen and, except it's on Adobe.
Yeah.
But they send you the version back of like the original and the other, and then you can always accept. You can choose, right, to argue a point or whatever. And then I remember reading it and being like, what's the difference really? Like all this fuss, right? Like
Yeah.
it's the same. So for example, Sandra and Basim were sitting at the podcast, and in today's podcast, Sandra and like something like that, right?
Right.
Like it sounds in your mind, you're like, it's the same. But when I would go back and I would read the chapter with the editor's edits, you could see it flowed better. Like it was still the same
It's
content.
their profession.
Yeah. And you really don't think how much of an impact it made, but it was huge. So then after that, I was like, mark away.
Yeah. Take it.
With
Yeah.
the first chapter reading back, you're like, oh.
So what was the hardest part about writing the book?
The parts that I choose not to think about, even today. So putting down the painful parts. Yeah, so there was a section there, and people sent me like screenshots of like tears on the paper. And
But you don't like go into like crazy detail, like.
So in the intro, I go into kind of what we talked about, but you're in the story more. Like you see it as if you're living it with me, if that
Right.
makes sense. So
Yeah.
it hits, but then it's, my identity was thrown, and then it eventually, has definitely a...
This isn't like a book about that moment in your life.
Just in the intro.
Just like
It's a short part.
which
It's
is the right.
Yes, it's sad.
It's not a long book to begin with.
No.
So yeah.
And then each chapter, as you see, like little chapters, gut health, sleep. So now people that have read it will tell me, and people from different religions have said to me, it really resonated with me. I practice a different faith, and I went through a totally different loss, but loss is loss, and it was all relatable to me, right?
So I guess maybe this is an obvious question, but like we talked about the hardest part. What was the most rewarding part of writing
the book?
Yeah.
So a friend
And
of
there
mine...
can be more than one.
Yeah, no, there's one. A friend of mine was sitting with me at Erin Mills Town Center in the food court in front of my favorite, the Greek place there.
Yes.
I'll always default Greek. So we're sitting there eating, and she says to me, what's next for you? Like, how are you going to quantify, like the book, it was a week before the book launch. How are you going to quantify success? What is that going to mean to you for a book? Is it a certain number sold? How about the audiobook? Whatever. And I thought about it, and I didn't take it lightly. I really was like, how did I not think about this end point, right? For so long, it was just getting the book out. And I was like, if I hear back from one person, like that person in my mind that I was imagining in the closet, right?
Yeah.
That it helped them, it will all have been worth it, because it was also very challenging writing the book while, working and family and everything else.
sure.
It was a lot of like late nights and stuff. She's like, okay, cool. And then I remember it was like a week or two after the launch, and I got this like long text message, and it was how I've been stuck in this rut, and now I feel like I have the practical tools, and I feel like you understand the pain that I'm feeling. Like it was just basically someone who had, with God's grace, been really, really touched by the message. And I remember just thinking like, yes,
I did
this
it.
is
Yeah.
it, and from time to time, with like a review or a message, whether it's on social or text, that's really what does it for me. I don't that's the metric that really touches me. And I guess the mistake I think a lot of people make with social, with these things, is getting so caught up in the end points, like whether it's likes or reviews or things sold. And I'm not saying that that's not important from a business standpoint to watch, but I
Right.
think if you get caught up in that, you lose why you're doing it. So I personally try not to focus on those kinds of things a lot. And I'm just like, your job, Sandra, is to pour out into love, to be a good steward of whatever God gives you, and what he chooses to do with it on his time, in his abundance or not, that's not your primary concern. And it's really freeing too.
I mean, so I want to take this conversation in two paths, but there's like, why embracing abundance? Like, why that name? Because it's not like directly, like you have to read the book to understand, but like why that?
So very specifically, there's a turning point that happened in my life, and I can't believe I forgot to mention this, so I'm glad you actually asked about the title. It was, you know how I said I started leaning back on the faith even though I was mad at God? So there is this ministry, a women's ministry, I can't remember if it was Crossroads or Proverbs 31. One of the things that was in my inbox, and I had read it, and she was talking about her pain and loss, and then the verse, John 10:10, where God says, I came that they may live and that they may live abundantly. And that was when it clicked for me. I was like, God wants me to live fully, not like crawling from day to day, like
Right.
half dead. He wants me to live big. I'm going to live abundantly. I'm going to embrace this new abundant life. So embracing abundance, a journey to wellness and wholeness through faith and self-care is how the title came.
I even as you say it, I'm like, like that's very inspirational, and I'm like, I want to live abundantly, like,
Right?
Because sometimes you mute yourself, right?
100%. I've never heard it that way, but exactly, you mute yourself.
Yeah, like you're like, no, I don't. I'll share a story from my life. Like, I did the whole cannabis thing, and then I was like, God's blessed me too much. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Right? And it did in its own way, but even in that, there's like, you have to embrace that. Like, look, I don't think if you ask somebody honestly, and I'll ask you this, like, do you want to live a perfect, negative event-free life?
No.
Like,
But I'm down for them to be little negatives.
yeah. Listen, you've experienced a lot, and
But of course, the peaks and troughs are
the
part
ebbs
of
and-
everything.
But in just like as you say this, I'm just like, you like embrace it, embrace the next thing to come. Don't be afraid of it. So I love that.
Yeah. And just live fully. You know how sometimes we're just so caught in like waiting for the next thing in our lives. You sometimes talk to people and like, I just got to get through exams, or I just got to get through this
Yeah.
work project, or I just got to get through whatever, which is fine. And it takes your focus. But can you really like live this day like it was your last, instead of just like, this is just a pause or a stomping ground?
It's funny because I was telling you, I just had another author on the podcast, and he brought up the same thing. He's just like, you are not promised tomorrow, right? So if today is your last day, what are those regrets that you want to avoid? What are those things that, if this is it, and you know that, like, what would you do differently? And most people just have to imagine that. You've unfortunately had the experience of like seeing what that looks like. So I think like that is maybe like the blessing in like the trauma.
Yeah.
I'd like to move the conversation to faith. I know we've kind of dabbled in and out of it, and you've quoted a few Bible verses, and we said a prayer before we started the podcast, which is the first time I've ever done that. What does faith mean to you?
Everything. It's, I think the faith that it runs through my life, it affects how the kind of wife I want to be. I want to be, a godly wife and have a godly marriage. I want to raise my children to be young disciples. I want to feel like a good steward in this world. Like my whole goal in life, like someone was asking me, part of like a speaking competition that's coming up, and they were saying, what's motivating you? And a lot of the common things were validation or whatever, things like that. And then so she said that I was the only one that ever answered it this way, but it's really the truest thing. I said, everything I do, I have this goal in mind, and I can actually picture it so clear. I want to get to heaven one day whenever I'm called, hopefully not too soon, but God knows. Yeah. And I want God to open his arms wide and say, well done, good and faithful servant. You shared every piece of love, every piece of knowledge I've ever given you. Welcome, And then I just like run to my new room and like the whole thing. But it's there. It's in everything.
And how do you, like you mentioned this, you're mad at God, right? Like how do you balance that? Right? Because like that's something that like I think every single person can relate to in their own way. There's a moment where it doesn't do the thing you're supposed to do, and then all of a sudden all those prayers or all those like words to yourself, like you're sending prayers up to heaven, like they don't come true, or it doesn't go the way that you want it to go. How do you maintain faith?
It's definitely hard when things are rough. I think the few things that have always helped me is remembering God is not a vending machine, number one, right? So It's not just like, here's my list of wants, thanks, right?
Thanks, Santa. Yeah. God is not Santa. Yeah.
And again, when he doesn't give you something, it's not because you were naughty that year and you got coal, right? It's because he sees what we don't see. Right? So he sees the big picture. Like you said, some of these rough things, are needed for our purification or our growth or our resilience or to help others, whatever it is. So really understanding that. And then I always think of his humanity, which helps. And I saw this meme. I'm always trying to look at like cool, like Christian raps and stuff. Cause as you know, I have like preteens and teens, like 3 of them with our blended family now. Yeah. So there was this one that I came across and it was like, even Jesus had sad boy times. And it was like when he was weeping over Lazarus. And the Bible does say Jesus wept, right? So I imagine like Jesus weeping beside me, like sad for me, but never leaving me. So he never promised that things weren't going to be hard, but he's not just watching from like afar, like he's right there. And believe it or not, there was times where I was my saddest and still angry, where I could feel Jesus like be tub, like just kind of, comforting me or patting my shoulder.
Even as you say this, I remember there was a sermon in Easter this year where it was like when like Jesus is like, it's up. I'm probably inferring this wrong or like interpreting this wrong, but like right before he gets crucified and he prays and he's like if you will it, let this cup pass from me. Like I don't want to go through this. So like even he goes through hard times, right?
I love that. Yeah.
But I'm pretty
but he
sure
surrenders and he's obedient. No, you nailed it.
So like that is, and this isn't like Christianity specific. No. Like this is like faith is an important part of life. There was moments where I was like, there was a moment in my life where I thought that faith was just a tool that the powerful use to control the ignorant. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that I was the ignorant one.
What was that transition like?
It's moments. What was the transition like? It's just like there's too much unexplained. There's just too much to unexplain, and I don't want to. I don't want to be the contrarian that thinks I have the answers to everything, and I'm okay and I've been brought up in a household, and I'm okay, and I sincerely believe that there's a higher power. So, like, what's wrong with accepting that?
Yeah.
Like,
I totally see that.
There's like, no one has all the answers, and if you do, your life probably sucks. So, so I'd rather, if that makes me ignorant or that makes me like a sheep or whatever, then I'm a proud sheep.
Like bah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but like I get that, and it was like that's a sincere thought, and like I've never, like I said, like I maybe my faith has been tested. I don't think it's been tested as much as God has tested yours. So, To like hear somebody go through it and be on the other end of it and like with such positivity, Sandra, like holy smokes, like you're
beaming it at you.
I come in and I was like, I want to teach a fitness class. But that is amazing to see. Okay, so we talked about like you're now into this public speaking, social media, marketing, all this stuff. Like, how did you get so good at it? I know you say you're not, but you're very good at it.
At which part?
Like public speaking, social, like.
So the public speaking, I think, definitely I'm not at social media, but we'll come back to that. Public speaking, I think with God's grace, has always been something I've done. So I taught Sunday school when I was younger. In school, I was always enjoyed speeches and presentations. And then for the last couple of decades in healthcare, I'm very used to speaking to groups of patients and colleagues. So that kind of naturally, organically grew. And I always would get really excited and enthusiastic about it, as well as some formal training in public speaking as well. So that's been really fun. The social media and the marketing is actually something that I struggle with in terms of I find it really time consuming and I find it not natural. Like I don't have any personal accounts or anything. And if it wasn't for STG Wellness, I would probably take big stretches off of social media. I don't really even like to watch TV. If I have downtime, I want to read a book or whatever, listen to music. So it's hard, but I found that it's incredibly necessary to grow a business nowadays, especially it's free. It's free marketing. People get to know you, you get to share some content, and people can reach out to you. So I feel like it's necessary. And the one thing I learned from people who are much more knowledgeable about this than me is that consistency is really important. And I think that's the hard part, because sometimes you're fired up with content, right? You're like, I can't wait to share this with the world. And other times you're like, what am I going to share?
Yeah, I got nothing
I'm
for you
due to
today.
share something this week. Can I tell a joke? So
that works because consistency is key.
Right?
Yeah, the algorithm needs consistency.
Yes.
Now, like as we just wrap this up, like you do have an incredibly inspirational story. If somebody that's listening to this is like, I see Sandra and like I resonate with her or I admire her and I want to follow in those footsteps, what advice do you have for that person?
I think it's important that we all know we have talents and gifts to share with this world. Everybody does. They might not know what they are yet, and that's okay. I was telling you, no spring chicken, and I started my spring. My spring, you were wise to keep your mouth shut there.
Great.
Right? You're like,
you look great, yeah.
But, starting this, in my 40s, right? So, or late 30s. So that's really, it's important that people know that there's no pressure if you're where you're at and you're like, I don't even know what I want to do, but I want to do something. But I think always follow where your heart is. So you're just going to keep circling back to, I like helping people with this. Maybe it's finance, maybe it's art, maybe it's walking with people. Maybe you're a good listener. Maybe whatever it is, the world is your oyster, but find the thing that really gives you that fulfillment and that joy, because I think you're happiest when you're really using whatever talents you have to their full potential. So find it as the first step, and then just start talking to people in that neighborhood. And you'll find that people are so generous and loving with their time, that will say, look how many people you mentor, and how you have these guests on to share their stuff. That's a perfect example of
social media consistency.
Yes. Social media consistency, but also being a resource.
This is a passion. I do this for a passion. And like, you said one thing that like social media is free. It's not free. It costs time.
Facts.
It costs time, it costs effort, but it's worth it. It is 100% worth it. And I want to end this off on a Sandra focused note. What's next? You've written a book. You've started a business. That business will eventually be the wellness resorts that we party at in a very healthy.
I was going to say with hibiscus coolers and 9 p.m. lights.
Sounds awesome, actually. But what's next for you?
I really would like to see the public speaking and the wellness speaking and encouraging others. I'd really like to see that expand and grow.
Okay.
So wherever there is any group of people, whether it's 2 or 200, and they're like, hey, we feel like we could really use some encouragement and some inspiration and get our wellness going, I want them to be like, let's call Sandra.
I think that I'm going to make a prediction here on June 4th or whatever day it is. Plus minus 24 months, you will have a TED Talk.
That is my prediction. Because that's one of my huge goals.
That is my prediction.
All right.
We're putting it into the universe.
From your, got you.
Sandra, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
I had so much fun.
And thanks to your great crew. They're so lovely. Look at them with the big smiles.
Yes.
What a great
They don't
team.
get a lot of love, but thank you for the
guys.
amazing crew that makes all this happen.
Even got me when I was standing in the wrong spot.
Yeah. If people want to get a copy of your book, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, so if they connect with me actually on Instagram, I will often post there when I have book signings. So if they want to come meet in person, if they're in the GTA, that's at STG_wellness. Or if they just want to go on and get one, they're available online at Amazon as well as like Indigo and Chapters Online.
You're so cool. Published author. Look at you, girl. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's another episode of the Bassam Hanna podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. To catch this or other full-length episodes, you can go to my website, bassamhanna.com. That's BASEMHANNA.com. Or you can catch full-length video episodes on YouTube, or you can listen to the audio on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Amazon. Until next time, peace.